Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Pete's session on dynamic tabs. I want to go through a couple of announcements first that everybody needs to be aware of. WinDev US now has full-blown order with credit card processing embedded. You're good to go. You can go up there and order your upgrades for WinDev 21 and pay for it online. Then we handle the rest of it and get you your order taken care of.
Order early and order often.
Yes, I agree. Order early, order often. We'll both be happy, and Jerome will be very happy with us if that's the case. Anyway, one of the things I want to kind of go over real quick on the ordering function of this, you'll find that up here in the corner there'll be a login for my account. When you order your first set or go through that, one of the options is to, or one of the items is to basically create you a login and everything to the environment. And what that does is it allows you to keep your billing information correct and your shipping information correct, and then you can view and edit all of your serial numbers or add your serial numbers to this. And when you get your new serial numbers, you can come back and register them here. Now, the reason behind this is that next year when we get to this point, you won't have to go hunting for your serial numbers during the upgrade process. We'll already know what they are and send them off to PCSoft, so that way they know which ones that are looking to be upgraded as we move across. So this is a nice little feature that you can load in all of your serial numbers for PCSoft products and keep them on a database, so that way they're easily accessible if you need them for whatever reason. So my suggestion is go ahead and do this. The price list is here. If you're doing multiple licenses for dongles where you're doing 3, 5, and network licenses, go ahead and give us a holler on those, because we'll have to, we're still going to be doing those manually. This is more for the individual licenses. Let us know. And if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. We can fix it and get you the best quote we possibly can, okay? So I just wanted to kind of go through that real quick before I turned it over to Pete Halstead and his course. Y'all enjoy it. Have fun. It's all yours, Pete.
Okay, so let me see. I need to share my screen real quick. All right, you're seeing my WinDev screens now, right? Okay, so what we're talking about today is dynamic tabs. Dynamic tabs was a new feature they added to version 20. And there was some comments, I believe it was one of either my webinar or Andy's webinars we did a few weeks ago. Both of us have dynamic tabs in our interface, and a few comments were made, and it became clear that a lot of folks still don't know exactly what they are and how to use them. So it sounded like it would be a good topic for us to kind of go through. Like I said, it came out with version 20. Andy and I have had dynamic tabs since version 18 because we really, really wanted them, so we went out there and figured out how to do them ourselves, and forged that trail, and blood, sweat, and tears of trying to make it work. And now with version 20, let's just say implementing them via the PCSoft way is much cleaner and funner than the way Andy and I did them back before the feature came out, let me tell you.
My black helicopter theory is that PCSoft already has it built, and they're just waiting for me and Pete to go through the pain and agony before they release it, because it's usually the next release.
Typical American paranoia.
Yes, paranoia, yes.
That's right. I've ordered some new aluminum foil to put another layer on my hat. All right. So anyway, I guess let's start with exactly what is a dynamic tab. A dynamic tab lets you open multiple windows open as a single window. Instead of each window popping up as its own completely self-contained item, they open up as tabs inside a tab control. The best example of that style of interface, and probably what started us down this path of now people expect this kind of interface, is modern browsers. We all use browsers on a daily basis, and they all have some form of a multi-tab interface where you can open up multiple pages as tabs. And then one of the really nice features is the tearaway tab. You can drag that tab out and make it its own standalone separate window. That's what dynamic tabs does, is gives us the ability to create that exact same style of interface inside our applications. But before we get too deeply into dynamic tabs, we need to talk about yet another WinDev feature, which is internal windows. And the reason we need to talk about that is because the whole concept and the ability of dynamic tabs requires you to use internal windows, because that's what you're actually displaying inside your tabs. An internal window, in simple terms, is a window the same as you've been coding all along, except it doesn't have the framework. In other words, it's a window, has all the same init code, everything you've been doing, but instead of displaying it as its own standalone window, it's displayed inside an internal window control. In other words, it becomes merged into another window. And now with dynamic tabs, it can be merged into that tab, very similar to an internal window control. Some places that you could use internal windows just in general, excluding the whole dynamic tab thing, is say you have a part of your application where you're displaying some current status, some particular numbers about your business that you like to have available. Obviously, that information that you're displaying there is quite different for the CEO versus the shipping clerk. The shipping clerks are all worried about, what orders have came in today and those sort of things, where the CEO is more interested in, bigger picture items. So there's some information that would be very different between those two. Now, there's some other information that you're displaying that would be common to both of those. So what you can do with an internal window is have the common data on a window, then have a portion of that window use an internal window control and display a different internal window for the CEO versus the shipping clerk. So now you have a piece of the screen that's dynamic and different. And the way we would have done that before we had internal windows is one of two choices. We would either have created multiple windows. We would have created a window for the CEO, a window for the shipping clerk, and all that common information would have been duplicated on both windows, which sucked because, eventually somebody's going to want us to change what information is included in the common section. And now we have half a dozen windows that all have those same controls on it. We got to edit all those windows to make them all match again. The other way we would have done that is to create one window and then have a bunch of logic hiding, unhiding, moving controls around for the CEO versus the shipping clerk. And of course, that also is a maintenance headache doing it that way. So with the internal window, we had the advantage of now just having a piece of our window be defined as its own little separate chunk. So exclusive of what we're doing with dynamic tabs, internal windows have advantages beyond that, but they've become very important with internal tab or dynamic tabs, because dynamic tabs use in internal windows. So it's definitely a concept that you need to look at and study and play with, because it'll help you in a lot of different areas. Okay, so now let's move on to the actual dynamic tabs, which is what we are going to be talking about today. And the first thing to know is dynamic tabs are not actually a new control. They're just new features that have been added to the existing tab control. So in other words, if you already have a tab control in your application, it's just turning on features to make that dynamic. And if you go to the detailed tabs, that's where you'll see enable the features of dynamic tabs. So making a tab control a dynamic tab control is as simple as a checkbox. Beats the heck out of buying a CodeJock library or something like that. PCSoft just says, here, turn this checkbox on, and you have a new feature. So that's very nice. So the ability to have the dynamic tab is as simple as turning the feature on. And then from a feature standpoint, we'll look at a couple of apps where I'm using dynamic tabs. This is probably your typical larger Windows application. We've got a ribbon bar here with a whole lot of functions and features. And as we open these windows, you'll notice that they're opening up as tabs in this main interface. So we're staying with, we only have one window. Our old style Windows interface, each one of these would have been popping up as another window, and our screen would get all cluttered up. With the dynamic tab interface, we're opening them up as tabs. And then, like I said, we also have the even better feature of we can grab this tab and pull it off into its own window. And where that really is nice is with multiple monitors, I can drag that window, and of course you can't see it because you're only seeing one of my monitors, but I now have that window off on one of my other monitors where I can keep an eye on it while I continue to interact with the rest of the application over in the main monitor. So that's the idea, and now I'm dragging that window back and dropping it back on the tab control. So that's the main idea behind dynamic tabs and the interface that we're trying to create. Okay, so what we're going to do today is create a similar interface to that in the NextAge open source demo app that I use for a lot of my demonstrations and so forth. It originally had some tabbed interface stuff using my browse form manager and so forth that we needed to do a lot of that stuff before version 20. And because I've been spending so much time in WebDev, I haven't had a compelling need to get back over and upgrade that stuff to the latest technology. Which basically means no one's come along and offered to pay me to do it. I chased the billable work over the work for the sake of work. So if we go over to our NextAge app, if we look at the original main menu, it had this internal window that I'm switching in and out, and this app has been available for download for quite some time on my website, so you can pull it down and look at it. And sometime over the weekend, I'll get all this wrapped up and put a new copy up there that has this new stuff that we're looking at today. So what we're going to do instead is create a new menu that's using the dynamic tabs instead. And the first thing to know about dynamic tabs is they require at least one static tab. which means that they always have one tab that is displayed regardless. And what I tend to do with that tab is make it my About screen. So my About screen is always available. And if you noticed in the Lab Driver app, which must still be running somewhere, there it is. We have an About. I think the YouTube stuff is making my screen driver act a little nuts there. But anyway, the About tab just has that About information that you would normally have on the splash screen. So that's what I tend to do with that static tab as an About screen. But if we look over at this other application, what I've done with the About page there is we have a dashboard, and I've used that About that static tab, that one required tab, to have a dashboard so that the dashboard's always available. So you can be creative, whatever you want to do, but some way, somehow, your dynamic tab always has one tab. That tab never gets closed. It's always in existence. And to declare that, as we start looking at the next stage source one, all you do is on the General tab, you can add as many static tabs as you want, and I've added one called About. And, you could even have multiple static tabs. For instance, you might have 3 parts of your windows that you always make available and open. So you could have 3 static tabs and then just have dynamic tabs from there. So the possibilities are endless, but you have to have at least one. So I've just declared an About tab, and all I did was stick the next stage logo and so forth on it to accomplish that About screen, splash screen, whatever you want to call it. The next thing that I do, and the standard on the Details tab, by default, the With New button is enabled, which makes it perform similar to the way browsers do. I can click the plus button and it'll add another new tab. Well, that feature really doesn't make sense for most of my applications, because the user is opening Windows and so forth by buttons on the ribbon bar and that sort of thing. So I don't need them to just open a tab via the plus button. So I turn that feature off so that I don't have that plus button available. Other than that, you can also make it where you don't have the tear off tabs by unchecking the undockable, but I like that feature, so I have that feature turned on. So if we look at the code, now that we have, at this point, we have a dynamic tab, we're good to go. The only thing we need to do is, as we click on the buttons of our ribbon bar, we need to open up our windows into those tabs. Now, if at this point your application doesn't have internal windows, you're going to have to do some work to convert your window to an internal window. I have the advantage of all my browsers were already internal windows, so I've already kind of done a lot of that work. So I'm a step ahead of the game. Although I did make a different copy of my customer browse, because the original one had a bunch of extra pieces in it for the way I originally did multiple tabs, and I don't need any of that stuff anymore because of the new dynamic tab feature. So the new one is just the browse as an internal window. And as you see, it's just like a window, except I don't have any framing or anything around it because it's going to be displayed inside something. So if we go back over to the menu, and if we look at the customer button, and we'll disable this one for a second. Enable this one. All we're doing is when you click on that customer button, we issue the command tab open, which is a new WinDev function that opens a new tab of a dynamic tab, and it takes 3 parameters. The name of the tab control that we're opening the new tab on, a caption that we want to display on that tab, and the internal window that we want to display inside that tab. So tab dynamic is the name of that tab that we added to our screen. I'm using the property of the button. I'm getting the caption of the button and using that as the caption of the tab. So since the button caption is customers, that makes the tab caption customers. So that way, if later on I decide that these need to be called clients, if I change that caption on the button, it's going to change the caption on the tab as well, so that everything stays matching up. Just another one of those little nice shortcuts that WinDev gives me that makes me more efficient, and I don't have those maintenance headaches later on of having to go find everywhere that I hard-coded the word customer. And then, like I said, the last parameter is the actual internal window that we're opening. So at this point, our app is already up and running with the dynamic tab. And every time we click on this customer button, it's going to open another tab and display that customer browse in it. Now, that is one of the things that I don't like about the dynamic tab interface. It becomes very confusing for the customer, the end user, to have multiple customer browsers open, and of course it's also not very efficient for the application. And I've got a class that I use to manage it so that I only open up one instance of the customer browse. And at the end of the webinar, we're actually going to take a look at that class. But for now, we're just looking at the basic functions and commands, and you see how easy it was. We dropped the tab control, enabled it to be dynamic, and we issued an open tab command. And just like that, we're up and running with dynamic tabs. These are tear off capable. Everything's already been accomplished. So what would be days of coding in some environments was a couple of check boxes and one function call for us in WinDev. So you can't complain about that, that's for sure. So now that we have the browse opening, let's look at the other piece that we want to do is, let me get this out of my way, is on the, not that browse, it'd be this one, the change button. And some of what you're seeing here is my original, this window was originally used my Brown Form Manager, and I got to go rewrite that to support some of this new stuff. So I'm overriding that function right now and just doing the code myself. So on the edit form, when you click the change button, we're going to issue a tab open again. And what we're doing now is we want to open up a customer form as a new tab on the dynamic tab control. So again, we're using that tab open function. The first parameter again is the tab control, but now we're on the iBrowse customer for dynamic tabs window, not the main window. So IntelliSense doesn't know where to find tab dynamic unless we prefix it with the window name, which is that when main dynamic tabs, which is the window where the tab control is actually declared. And if you've done any communication between windows, you're familiar with that, and it's yet another great feature of the WinDev environment, is that being able to reference items on other windows. Now, of course, this window has to be open, otherwise we're going to get a runtime error. But if that window is not open, your entire application is shut down in this instance, so we're pretty good. That's the tab control. We're going to open up a new tab on. This is the caption, and all I'm doing is saying I'm editing the customer. I want that caption because I can open multiple forms. I don't want them all to just say edit customer, because then I don't know which one belongs to which. So I'm concatenating the company name onto that caption. The third parameter is the actual internal window we're opening, and here in this instance, that's the iForm customer, the customer form, which, if I come over here, is this form. And then the last two parameters are actually parameters that are getting passed to the iForm customer. If we look at iForm customer, if we look at its definition, you see it accepts two parameters. So that's what those last two parameters are, is the sysid and an instance of the Browse Form Manager class, because those are the parameters that the window we're opening require. So they're not technically anything to do with tab open. It's just tab open has to know those parameters so that it can pass it to the internal window when it opens it. And at that point, now that we have that tab open there, we can now open a customer browse, and we can double click on a customer record, and notice every time we click on a customer record, it's opening a new dynamic tab for that particular record. And now we really start seeing the issue of not managing dynamic tabs, because if I click on Pete Halstead again, I now have two forms open for that same record. And now we can really get into some confusion and issues. If I update one and then come over and update the other one, I've got mixed matched data and all kinds of issues. So I definitely don't like opening up the same form multiple times. And again, we can manage that via the class we're going to look at. But just strictly from a feature standpoint, you see it's very easy to open up multiple windows and have all the features we need. So before we get into the class, the last thing we want to look at is the actual form. If we look at the Save button of the form, we need to close the tab when we save the record. We want to close that form down. We want to close that tab down. The help, and I'm not sure why, but the help says, if we look at the help for the tab close function, it says that we can call it with just the name of the tab control, and it will close the currently dynamic pane that's open. So whatever tab we happen to be on should close. The problem is, anytime I try to define it with that syntax, I get a compiler saying that no syntax is compatible. It seems like the second parameter is always required. So I don't know if that's a bug in the help, a bug in the feature, or a bug in my understanding of the help or feature. regardless of which of those three it is, all I know is I need to get my job done. So instead, that second parameter is the alias of the tab. Every time you open a tab, it gives it an alias. And if you've worked with internal windows, you're familiar with that concept, because every window has an internal alias that, every internal window has an alias that declares as part of it. Because you can have the same window open multiple times, you can't refer to it as its window name. You have to refer to it as its alias name.
Pete, can I interject there?
Uh-huh.
Just in connection with that, I think your problem lies at the fact that you're using an internal window on a window. If it was a straight window, it would have worked.
It is a straight window.
But aren't you doing it the internal window?
When main dynamic tabs is a standard good old-fashioned window.
Yeah, but what you're doing is that this one, what you're doing now, where you're doing the tab close, is actually an internal window. It's not a. If you look at that,
I don't think it shouldn't have anything to do with it, because the function is the same either way.
Go to the iForm underscore customer.
I'm on that main window, and I'm still getting that compile error.
But you. Okay. Are you on the main window? You're still getting the same issue.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I don't think it has anything to do with it.
Okay. Okay. No, fine. Just thought maybe because of the internal window.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
No. That doesn't have anything to do with it.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. So anyway, what I've got to do is reference the alias of the tab that I want to close. Well, the value of the tab control is the alias of the current tab that's being displayed. So that's why you see this. I'm calling tab close. I'm saying, close the tab of this tab and close this alias, which is, the value. To make that a little clearer, do value here so that you know what I'm not referencing the control in this one. I'm referencing the value of the control. The first one I'm referencing the control. The second one I'm getting the value of it, and that is when we run it. Whoever put that irritating splash screen up should be shot, shouldn't they? When we run this, when we click save, it saves the record and close the tab. That's what we're doing with that close tab function. So that at this point, you now can put a dynamic tab on your screen. You can open dynamic tabs and display internal windows in them. You can close them. You have all the bits and pieces to go out and start adding dynamic tabs to your interface. But the thing you're likely to run into, that I ran into anyway, is that's all well and good, but I kind of want to manage things a little bit. I don't want to be completely willy-nilly. Like I said, I only want one instance of the customer browse to be opened. I absolutely don't want you to be able to open up the customer form multiple times for the same record. So I need to some way kind of manage that process and not just let you willy-nilly open a new dynamic tab every time you click on something. The way I've done that is I've created a simple little class to manage dynamic tabs, and really the only thing that class is doing is keeping track of what windows have been opened and what tabs, and basically keeps a master list of what tabs are open so that I can do things with that information. So if we look at the class, it's a pretty simple class. It has a structured array in it, and if you ever watched any of my webinars, it should come as no shock that it has a structured array, because what can I say? I love me some structured arrays. So that array maintains 3 pieces of information: the name of the window, the alias that we just talked about, that's the alias of the tab, and the caption of the tab. That's the only 3 pieces of information it maintains. So I now have a list of all the tabs that I have open, what internal window they're displaying, what their caption is. That's all there is to this class. And then I have a few fields down here that I need to know the tab control that we're managing. And the other 2 we really don't need to get into today. They're niceties and really have nothing to do with the actual management of tabs. So to declare and use this class, the first thing we need to do is we need a global instance of it, because we're managing it for the entire application. We want one global instance of this class. So over in my project code, I declared an instance of the dynamic tab manager. The next thing we need to do is on the window that actually contains the tab control, we need to put in a few lines of code there to let it know the name of the tab control that it's managing. And then, like I said, this has to do with some special logic I have to manage that about tab that really has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. So the real line of code that is important to us today is we let it know what tab control it's managing. So at that point, we now have an instance of our class declared. We've let that class know what tab it's managing. If we then go to the customer button, instead of issuing this tab open command, instead we want to call a method of the class called create tab. We're passing in the internal window we want to open. This is called SubName, and we'll look in the logic and understand that a little more here shortly. And then what we want the caption of that tab to be. If we look at the code behind that method, it may look a little complex, but the long and short of this little bit of code is we find out if the window is already open. So we take the name, which is a combination of the name and the subname, which at this point our subname is blank, so that doesn't really enter into the equation at all. So we see if there's already a record in our array. If there is, that means that we've already opened that window in a tab. So instead of opening yet another new tab, instead I want to set focus to that tab. And what that does is bring that tab to the foreground instead of just keeping the opening customer tabs. We're now going to just set focus back over to it. If it has not, if we don't find it in the array, then we just issue the tab open command. And if you look at the logic of what we're doing here, this is that same tab open command that we hard coded earlier. Now we're issuing it inside the class. The only difference is we have some array management going on. One of the things that tab open does is it returns to you the alias of the tab it created. And that's important to me when I get into closing tabs later. So I'm capturing the alias of the tab we've opened, and I'm adding a record into the array. So that's really the only difference between calling this method and just doing a tab open is this array management I've got wrapped around the function. So that I'm adding a record to the array when we open the tab. If the array record already exists, I don't open a new tab, I set focus. That's really what this feature is doing. And we can actually look at that in action. Let me make sure I've got that. So now if we run our app, if we click on customer, and let me open up a couple of forms so that you can tell. Okay, so now if I go up and click on customer again, in our first example, we would have opened up another new customer tab and displayed the browse again. Instead, in this instance, when I clicked on customer, all it did was set focus back to that customer tab. So now I'm not opening up multiple instances of that customer. I'm only opening up one. So that's the first thing that the class does for me. And that the call to it is very similar to the original call, so it's pretty easy to implement. Now's where it gets a little more complicated, and this is also where my prep work ended because I had a customer call this morning and I didn't get to spend as much prep time as I had hoped. Now we're going to see how the sausage is made. If we come to our change button,
wing it.
Yeah, exactly. If we come to our change button, oh, you know what? There's one other thing that we want to look at before we do this. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with dynamic tabs, but it's a pretty advanced feature that is very cool. It took me a little bit to understand how to use it, but once I did, it's a very cool feature. Remember when you open that tab, when you use tab open, if your window requires parameters, you've got to pass those parameters to that window. Well, I've got that same requirement with my method. You might have a window that requires parameters. I don't know how many parameters there are or aren't, and all that great and wonderful stuff. So that's what this comma asterisk is up here. It says that this method accepts these three parameters: window name, subname, caption, and then an unlimited number of additional parameters. I don't know what their names are. I don't know what type they are. I don't know anything about them. I just know that I can accept additional parameters. And then this little bit of code right here says if there were only three parameters passed, one of the properties is how many parameters are there. If there's only three, I do my normal function call. If there are additional parameters, I pass those parameters. I tell it, okay, if there's additional parameters, pass parameter 4 to however many parameters there were into this function. So if you pass 3 additional parameters, this line of code is going to pass those 3 additional parameters onto the tab open function. So again, this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with dynamic tabs, but if you're writing any kind of function that is somewhat dynamic and needs to be able to do something like that, that ability is pretty sweet.
That's really cool. That.
So that's something to look at and study, and I guarantee you at some point in your life you'll be really glad to have that ability. Okay, so now our change button, we want to call our method instead of calling our tab open. In this instance, the name of our form is iFormCustomer. Now we're going to use the subname. I'll explain to you what that is shortly. And then we want to use this as the caption. And we need to pass those additional 2 parameters. Okay, so this is, again, accomplishing the exact same call as the tab open, and it's just doing it through the class method. I'm telling it I want to use the internal window iForm customer. I now am passing this middle parameter that's called SubName. I'm putting the customer ID in there, and we'll pop back over and look at the logic, and I'll explain that shortly. Then I'm just defining the caption, the same as I did before. And then the last two parameters are getting passed, just like they're getting passed via the tab open, because this iForm customer requires those two parameters. So let's pop back over to our method code and look at this SubName. By the way, another cool little feature of the IDE, you notice when I double click and highlight SubName, it's also highlighted elsewhere in my code, so now I can see where all SubName is used. And what SubName is doing is it's concatenating itself with window name. So window name is a combination of window name and SubName. What that's for is that we're now working on a form. I want to open up multiple tabs for the form, but I don't want to open up multiple forms for the exact same record. So by making the sys-ID of the record ID, part of the name, I get a unique name for that window. So if the record ID is 3, my name's going to be iForm 3, iForm customer 3. So then if I double click on that same record again to edit that same record, it's going to exist in the array. But if I click on a different customer, that has record ID 4, it's going to be a different name. I won't find it in the array. So I open up a multiple tabs. So now I can open up multiple forms, but only open up one for a particular record. So let's, if I did that right, if being the key word there, I now, if I click on Pete Halstead, it opened. If I click on Snow White, it opened. If I come back over here and click on Pete Halstead again, it set focus to the first form. It did not open a second Pete Halstead form. So that's what the SubName is for, is so that I can now manage multiple forms and avoid opening the same form for the same record ID multiple times. The only thing left to do is, again, my class is managing, keeping track of those tabs that are open or closed. Well, that means that I can't just close a tab willy-nilly. I got to call a method in here to close the tab so that it knows that it got closed. So if we come over on the form on this Save button, instead of issuing the tab close command, which is what the standard WX function is, instead we're going to do dynamic tab manager dot close tab, and the alias, how do I get that? Okay, Andy, dance for a minute.
Well, my dancing shoes are upstairs, so I won't be able to do that. But dynamic tabs, we've been using them for quite a while, and I use them in the SQL little engine that I built, and I really like them. I really like them. They're a lot more flexible in what you can do, especially if you run multiple monitors or you got customers that run multiple monitors, then they can tear off something and do things with it. So I'm really, it was one of the things that I saw, oh Lord, it was probably 7-8 years ago in C#. no, about 9 years ago, 10 years ago in C#. And I thought that was a very nice little interface to work with if you're an advanced user. So do keep in mind that what you may want to do is also set up some configurations for your end user to turn that on or off. So that way, if they do tabs and the end user is a little bit more simplistic in its abilities, in their abilities, then you could turn it off, and they won't be running around going, "What happened? I don't know what happened. I lost everything." So do keep that in mind.
That was a great impersonation of most of my users.
It is. It is, and it's only because I've heard it for literally over 20 years. Getting close to 30.
Okay, so anyway, the parameter that the dynamic tab manager close tab method requires is the alias of the tab, which is also the alias of the window that you want to close. Well, this is one of the things that I've battled with, and how am I going to know this, and do I need to pass it as parameter and capture it and all that great and wonderful stuff. And I finally figured out that it's pretty easy to do. If we look at myself full name, which is myself generally, generally it is going to return, in this instance, we happen to be on the save button. It's the name of that button, and it's going to be the window name button name is what full name is going to contain. Well, because we're living inside an internal window, it's a little more complex than that. And if we look at, I actually ran it so we could look at it. This is what is in the myself full name. Because our actual window name, remember, we only have one real window of our application. It's that main window. Everything else is just an internal window displayed inside there. So our window name dot the tab control, the container that it's in. So inside that main window, inside the tab dynamic, we have the alias, which is the particular instance of this window that we created via the open tab. And then we actually finally get into the template name and the button name. Well, the thing that I want is this alias too. That's the alias of this window. Again, using a very cool WX function, extract string, all I have to do is, myself full name. I want the third piece of that if you break it up by periods. So because I know it's going to come in with periods, and I know the third one is my alias, all I have to do is say extract string the myself full name. I want the third one, and the separator is periods. This is normally used with CSVs and so forth, where you're extracting them by commas or pipe symbol or something like that. But as you see, it's also very handy for extracting out pieces of property names like this. So that gives me my alias of my tab. Then all I'm doing is passing that to the close tab function. The close tab function is pretty straightforward. It's calling the tab close function of WX. The only other thing it's doing is removing that record out of the array. The reason I need to do that is that window is now closed. I need to remove that record out of the array so that if you run that button, click on that button again, it'll open it up. If I didn't clear out that record out of the array, my logic would be trying to set focus on a tab that no longer exists. And that's the reason I can't use the tab close function directly. I have to tell it, I have to close the tab via the class so that the class can manage the array. And that's really the only thing this class is really doing, is managing that array that's keeping track of all the tabs that are open. So that's the only thing that we need to do in our code is on that form, on the save button and also on the cancel button, is call it this way instead of calling the tab close function. And we can get over to the cancel button as well. All right, so now we can run it. We can open up customer, we can open up Herman Munster, we can come back over here, Peter Pan. If we save Herman Munster, it closed it. If we double click, it'll open our Herman Munster again because it's no longer open. Had we not saved and closed, it would have brought it back into focus. So the class has just made our interface a little more user-friendly and safer without adding a lot of complexity to our coding. We're basically doing two function calls the same as we were before. It's just we're calling class methods instead of calling the WX function directly. And again, sometime over the weekend, I will get all this cleaned up. When I post the article, I will also post a link for you to download the class and this demo app and so forth. I just got to get the rest of the code cleaned up so that it's all in place. We have any questions or anything, Andy?
Not as yet. I did not see anything as yet. I'm looking. No, that's comments. Let me look at questions. Where are the questions? I'm in the Hangout toolbox and I don't see questions. Did we just have comment tracker up here? I think I messed up.
I'm seeing Q&A and I see all kinds of questions. Never done this in Hangout. That's okay. So far, the questions seem to be on using Hangouts. Let's see. We're down here. Eduardo Bravo. In a multiple platform application, Windows and Linux, can dynamic tabs be turned on in conditional code? Yes, it is a property that the dynamic tabs can be enabled and disabled dynamically, and
that's how you can like shut them off for as a configuration for.
Right. So if we look at tab dynamic dynamic tab, and now my tab control does not support dynamic tabs. So from there, it'd just be wrapping some conditional code around around this statement for if you're in Linux mode, and that can be done in 20. It's much easier to do in 21 to give you a little preview of 21. And somebody's going to have to help me with the next question because my Spanish is not the best in the world.
I don't think that's in your question. That is not relevant to this chat here at the moment. It's asking who the best fighter in the world is.
Okay. Well, I actually have
the best fighter in the world.
I actually have an opinion on that, but yeah, I think that's a separate webinar.
There you go. I think somebody's lost his place here.
All right. So that was the only question we had. So that does it for my song and dance today, Andy.
Cool. Well, let's talk about what in 2 weeks what we're going to do. I have been, and I'm going to try to gain some time to do it. So tentatively, and we'll do the announcement in a few days just to make sure I can get around it. We had been going through and building web services, right and left, and showed you how to build all the web services and all that information and things like this. But we also know out there in the world there's a thing called REST services.
Mm-hmm.
And Jerome from PCSoft is for graciously, or either that or he likes to torture me, one of the two, gave me a webinar he did on developing a REST service in WebDev.
Very nice.
Now, the deal about it is obviously it's in French. Mm-hmm. So I am attempting to translate, and I know that's a funny thing to hear, but I'm attempting to translate it enough to kind of get my head around what he was doing so I can recreate it.
Uh-huh.
And so what will happen if I got the time this week to delve into it a little bit further, we'll be announcing how to create a REST service directly out of your WebDev product.
Very nice.
And that would be a REST service that anybody in the world could use. So if you need REST, or if people are asking you, we do need REST, but if people are asking you for REST services for your products that you have out there and you do have WebDev, then you ought to be able to accomplish that or web services either direction, because it kind of depends on how they want to do it or how people want to do it. But it gives you options is what it does. It really gives you a lot of options. So that's what I'm looking at doing in 2 weeks, is a English version translated from a French version of REST services, which ought to be just a fun thing to listen to. That's all I can say. It ought to be just a hoot. Other than that, that's all I got for you. If anybody else got any comments left, or he can pick himself off the floor from laughing so hard, something like that. All I can say is y'all be good, or be good at it, and this is on YouTube. Talk to you later.
Cheers. Thanks, Pete.